Hey there, guys. All right, today we are moving on with some more miscellaneous myths from OSP. This time, the Epic of Mwindo. Mwindo? Mwindo? Window? M. Mwindo? Probably king shit. Mwindo. Why can't I do an M and W together? I give up. The Epic of that. I don't know where this. I'm gonna say. Take a shot in the dark here. I don't think it's I don't. No, that name kind of makes me think Africa. I'm gonna go with Africa. That's gonna be my guess. Where this myth takes place. Just off that name. Like, no, I can't be South America. Sticking with Africa. That's my guess. Go ahead and find out.
Probably already know that written stories are a relatively modern invention. Before that, people told stories by, well, telling them. Epics like the Iliad were initially passed down through oral tradition, only being codified into text relatively late in the process. Before that, they were told and retold and memorized and performed by storytellers. Now, this isn't surprising because writing as a rule develops after language. And even if you have a writing system, you might not want to reduce your complex multimedia performance down to a simple written telling. Words on paper are very useful, but they only become entertaining when the reader essentially imagines a performance out of the text. All in all, it's fairly reasonable to assume that a lot of old stories mostly persisted through the spoken word rather than having been written down. So let's talk about Africa for a minute.
Oh my god, it's from the Sundiata? Fun fact for you guys, I'm currently, when I'm recording this, and actually I'll be uploading this when I'm still in the class, I will not have finished it yet. I am currently in an African history class, pre-1600 African history class. So I know some of this. Not too many of the actual, like, I know it, I have an understanding.
This might surprise some of you, but there are a number of epics for Africa that have persisted in oral tradition for centuries and have only been written out in the last few decades, like the epics of Sundiata
Because of racism.
and Mwindo. For the most part, they've been
Eurocentrism.
transcribed by enterprising anthropologists making an effort to preserve the stories in a way that feels tangible to our book-loving society. There's very little written history or literature from pre-colonial Africa, although there are a truly staggering number of stories and storytellers,
Exactly. Because of racism.
Including entire social castes of storytellers, especially in West Africa. The effort to transcribe their stories and histories and bring them out of oral tradition and into literature is surprisingly recent, and a lot of that is honestly just because Europe didn't initially go to Africa for the culture. The lack of written history and storytelling, as well as a general lack of—
Let's be real, Red. Europe never really went places for the culture. They went there for the land.
Of other such story-preserving aids in sub-Saharan Africa, like statues or friezes, led the colonizing powers to think that Africa just didn't have a history or much in the way of stories, or at least none worth recording. And because they didn't really have a vested interest in being proven wrong, they didn't really pursue this line of cultural examination further. But
Of course, she's not a historian, like, but she does do some good research. But this is, like, obviously, you also can't really. It's hard to talk about the colonialization of Africa in, like, we're only a minute 30 in. This would take, discuss this forever. Just the complexities. But yeah, an oversimplification, Europe didn't give a shit about the African cultures.
But you'll be happy to know that this is no longer the case. Anthropology and archaeology just needed a few decades to develop new techniques that didn't draw from a written or tangible history and instead focused on oral history. And as a result—
And so I actually ended up writing a little bit. It was one of our weekly assignments. I don't remember exactly what I talked about in it. But essentially what was in the when European, or when it started to shift where they wanted to actually start writing down, recording African history, there were Europeans arguing that it wasn't proper history because it wasn't already written down by the Africans. They ignored the African long-standing oral traditions of the native Africans, and so they discredited that. They were like, no, oral tradition is not proper history. That was the early arguments against recording African history, is that it wouldn't be accurate because it was oral tradition, despite oral traditions being being good sources for history. They exist in all societies. There's a reason oral traditions exist in every single culture in human history. But then, of course, the thing I mentioned in my discussion post for the week in regards to that topic is essentially, what are your thoughts on oral tradition being regarded as proper history or whatever, something like that. And I ended up saying something along the lines like, if you cannot say that African oral tradition, if you can say that African oral tradition cannot be trusted as a reliable recording of African history, then you cannot say a lot of the early writings that we have from the Greeks specifically as reliable recordings of history then either, because those were oral traditions first before they got written down. So that's a really oversimplification of what I said, but essentially kind of bare bones of what I said.
We've started getting a lot more insight into the history and the storytelling of Africa. So
finally, for one of these miscellaneous myths, I was able to deep dive into some fucking history for once. Suck it, people that commented on all the other miscellaneous myths videos shitting on me. Suck my dick.
So without further ado, let's take a look at a Nyanga epic from the Congo Great Lakes region, codified in 1956 by Daniel Bibuk from a performance by the storyteller Sheikh Harisi Rureke. It's time to talk about the Epic of Mwindo. So Mwindo's story begins with his father, Mwindo, a name which literally means Mwindo's father, who is a big fancy chief of the village of Tubondo and has 7 wives and wants 7 daughters.
I better not see any Y chromosomes in there.
He's absolutely adamant about wanting daughters for one reason only: bride wealth payments. See, if you have a son and he wants to marry a girl, you have to pay the girl's family bride wealth to persuade them to give up their daughter. But if you have a daughter, or better yet, several daughters, those bride wealth payments from aspiring suitors can make you stupid rich. Mwindo holds the attitude that
I'm amazed nobody's thought of this before.
That because nobody pays to marry sons around here, only daughters will make him rich, and sons will be financial liabilities. So if any of his wives have sons, he'll murder them and try again. So
Huh? Murder? Carrying on the tradition of miscellaneous myths, huh? Going straight to murder.
Knocks up his wives, and soon enough, 6 of them have their daughters, just as planned. But his 7th and favorite wife just stays pregnant, which bums her out for a variety of reasons, not least of which being it's hard for her to take care of herself while super pregnant. However, her unborn kid, that's Mwindo, unsurprisingly, decides to make things easier on his mother by magically doing her chores while he bides his time in preparation to make his grand entrance. Classy. So Mwindo follows up his unorthodox prenatal existence by entering the world in a similarly unorthodox fashion, either emerging from his mother's middle finger or her navel. Sources disagree. Also, like many other epic
I'm in trouble. Hi, Mom. Conga.
Heroes, he's not only born walking and talking, but also equipped with a fancy magical tool. In this case, a magical fly swatter called a conga. Fun fact, his most commonly used epithet is the one born walking and talking, and a big deal is made of how competent he was at birth. So Mwindo busts
What is the meaning of this? This is a boy.
in, and upon seeing his manly progeny, immediately whips out his spear and chucks it at baby Mwindo, who stops it with his fly swatter and snaps it in half. Upon
Get rid of the baby. I can walk, you don't need to carry me.
seeing that stabbing is ineffectual, Mwindo orders his counselors to bury the baby alive instead. Satisfied, Mwindo goes to bed, at which point he wakes up to the
Look at me, I'm Mwindo. I'm so cool, I can already talk and junk.
sound of Mwindo singing about how great he is, having dug himself out of his
You're such a talented infant. You fucking know it, dude.
grave and gone back to his mother. So Mwindo reasons that stabbing and burying alive may not have worked, but maybe sealing him in a drum and dumping him in the river will. Now this doesn't kill Mwindo, but it does get him out of Mwindo's hair for a while, as Mwindo floats down the river and ends up being picked up by his aunt Iangura, who takes him in and raises him to young adulthood. Mwindo's grateful to his aunt.
Hey, thanks for raising me to adulthood. Now let's go deal with my dad. This is very much kind of similar to that, to Zeus and Kronos.
For raising him, but he has unfinished business with his father and tells her he's gonna go back to Tubondo and fight Mwindo. Iangura understands.
Alright lads, time for a power-up.
But is rather concerned for Mwindo's well-being, so she has her brothers-in-law forge Mwindo, which either means that they make him armor, or that they take him apart, forge his body like metal, and then put him back together, now as an indestructible badass with a body like iron. The specifics vary from telling to telling. So Mwindo's raring to go, but his aunts and uncles
How about you don't fight an army single-handedly unless you have to?
Warned him that Tabondo is huge and Mwindo has many men to fight for him, so he should let them come along and help him. So Mwindo and his entourage head towards Tabondo, stopping along the way to make camp. When Iyangura mentions that they have no food, Mwindo does his magic thing, waves his fly swatter, and summons all the food from Tabondo to fly over and help him out. So before Mwindo goes to fight, his uncles insist that he lets them go first. This is a bad call, as they are horrendously outnumbered and all die. Mwindo is enraged by this and storms Tabondo himself, terrifying the men of the village with his indestructibility. Mwindo freaks out and runs.
Nope. I would You know what? That's a smart bad guy right there. He's getting the hell out.
Away, just in time to avoid being toasty fried by the lightning Mwindo calls down with his fly swatter to kill everyone in Tabondo. So Mwindo is victorious with his father on the run, but Iyangura is sad to see everyone
his aunt lived?
Dead. So Mwindo goes around with his fly swatter and swats his uncles in the face to wake them up, which works, so that's cool. But Mwindo is still missing. A hawk informs Mwindo
Mwindo, your dad wussed out all the way to hell.
That his father ran away down a hole and is now in the underworld, the land of the gods, and is meeting with Mwisa, ruler of the dead. Iyangura warns him that
as the only responsible adult in your life, I am obliged to inform you that this is very dumb.
That only the dead belong in the underworld and no one ever leaves, but Mwindo sings that song about how great he is again and dives on in. So Mwindo lands in the underworld and heads over to the well, where he encounters Kahindo, Mwisa's daughter. Kahindo knows all.
Okay, listen up. My dad does not play fair, and this underworld works on Persephone rules.
About Mwindo and warns him that her father will try and trick him into drinking his beer and eating his porridge. He has to politely refuse, or he'll be trapped in the underworld. Very classic. So Mwindo goes to meet with Mwisa.
Well, hello. I take it you want your dad. I would appreciate that.
Who again tells him that nobody ever leaves the underworld. Mwindo's not too worried.
Well then, kid, you like proving yourself? Oh, fuck yeah, do I? I am a protagonist of a mythology. Of course I do.
And turns down the offer of food, at which point Mwisa says he'll allow him to leave with Mwindo if Mwindo accomplishes a couple tasks for him. Task number 1 is to raise a banana grove to maturity over the course of a single day. Mwisa gives him tools and seeds to work with, at which point Mwindo animates them with his fly swatter and lets the grove plant and tend itself while he takes a nice nap. He starts collecting his fully grown bananas, but Mwisa is upset that he's actually doing the task and decides to sabotage him. Mwisa takes off his cowrie shell belt and sends it to attack Mwindo, whereupon it constricts around him and suffocates him to death. Fortunately, Mwindo's magic fly swatter animates itself and brings him back to life, and Mwindo sends the fly swatter to do Mwisa the same courtesy the god did him. Then he finishes collecting his bananas and heads back to the village, subsequently using
Wake up, sleepyhead. Bananas for breakfast.
His fly swatter to resurrect Mwisa from the whole reciprocal murder thing and hands over his bananas. So Mwisa gives him a
So wait, he just fucking nonchalantly about murdered a god. Nice.
Another task, to gather honey from a certain tree. Mwindo climbs the tree and smokes out the bees, but he can't quite reach the honey, and while he's going for it, Mwisa sends his belt to strangle him again. That goes about as well as it did before, and Mwindo is thoroughly sick of the task, so he cuts to the chase and calls down more lightning to split the tree in half, at which point he retrieves the honey. So Mwindo returns to Mwisa and hands over the honey, then demands his father. Unfortunately,
oh, was I not supposed to tell him you were coming?
it would appear that Mwisa warned Mwindo of Mwindo's presence, and Mwindo seems to have run away. Mwisa refuses to help, so Mwindo temporarily kills him again and runs after Mwindo, who is hiding in a cave with Ntumba, who I'm pretty sure is a god of aardvarks? It's a little unclear. Mwindo then seeks
you want your dad? Gamble for him.
refuge in a village belonging to this guy Shibarungu, who challenges Mwindo to a gambling game. Mwindo wagers and loses everything but his magic fly swatter, and then wagers that too. Fortunately, the universe appears unwilling to separate Mwindo and his fly swatter, so he immediately wins everything back and runs out to get his father, which actually works this time. Now, interestingly enough, Mwindo and Mwindo are very respectful and chill with one another. Finding Mwindo has left Mwindo in
I got my dad. Aye. Cool. Now, do you mind resurrecting my dad?
a very good mood, and he shows him off to everyone who tripped him up along his journey, while also fixing all the damage he did to them and their stuff. Mwisa, who is no longer dead,
Marry my daughter! Oh, I couldn't possibly.
offers Mwindo his daughter Kahindo's hand in marriage, but Mwindo says he'll only get married in his home village of Tabondo. So Mwindo brings Mwindo home, resurrects everyone else in the village from that one time he murdered everyone, and berates Mwindo for being a bad father. He calls a big village meeting and basically
You abandoned me and mistreated my mother. I did do those things you said.
puts his father on trial for treating him so badly without any reason, and Mwindo admits that what he did to Mwindo and his mother was wrong. He abdicates his
But I'm making you king! Everything's forgiven.
role as king and names Mwindo as his successor. Mwindo is sort of honorably exiled to live in
Oh, but you're still exiled. Totally fair, dude.
another location, and Mwindo gets gifted 4 wives by his father, uncles, aunts, and the neighboring pygmies.
Quick PSA. Pygmy is considered offensive, but unfortunately there is no PC term to replace it, and the story translation I used did not identify the specific ethnic group by any more exact term, so this is the only descriptor I have available. Geographically, the exact group would probably be either the Kango, Efe, or Aswa.
Overall, life is
what you want, that's gonna get me copyrighted.
It's good. A few days of being king later, Mwindo has a craving for pork and sends off a few hunters to get him a boar. Unfortunately, they accidentally disturb the dragon Kirimu, who eats all the hunters but one, a man named Unkarongo, who runs back to Mwindo to warn him about the dragon. Mwindo hasn't left for his exile.
Son, I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but you know Kirimu is a dragon. I know. And I'm so excited.
Yet, so he's there to warn Mwindo not to fight Kirimu because he's a famously dangerous monster who'll bring devastation to their kingdom. Mwindo obviously doesn't care and tracks down Kirimu, takes him by surprise, and kills him with his fly swatter. Then has him carried back to the village so they can retrieve the 3 hunters from Kirimu's stomach. Unfortunately for everyone involved, the lightning god Nkuba, who's so far spent most of this story chucking lightning at stuff Mwindo wants lightning chucked at, is in fact blood brothers with Kirimu, and when he sees his dragon buddy dead, he's very distressed. Now, because Mwindo didn't know Kirimu was a friend of his, Nkuba is not as mad as he could have been, but he still tells Mwindo that he needs to learn to have a little chill sometimes, and carries him up into the sky so
oh boy, a learning experience!
We can spend a year seeing things from a larger perspective. The various sky gods
Mara, big fan of your work. Look, same, but you gotta learn to chill, dude.
Tell Mwindo that, yeah, he may be cool, but his heroism and
Wary, look, man, you're cool and all, but there's always a bigger fish. Ooh, good point.
his power don't mean anything in the face of something like, say, the sun. They're all very upfront about how much
Kubiki, the star. Alright, man, the deal is you stop being so cavalier with the murder. You alright, champ? Yeesh.
they respect him, because otherwise he'd be super dead right now, but they make him swear an oath to not kill anything ever again, or else Nkuba will pull him into the sky again, this time for good. Lesson learned, Mwindo returns to Earth to roll wine.
Hey guys, I'm back! Woo! And I've learned that murder is wrong! Yay!
Wisely and justly for the rest of his days. The story, interestingly enough, wraps up with 4 explicit morals.
A good ending for a mythology? What?
Moral number 1. There's no such thing as a bad child, and no child deserves to be rejected by their family, regardless of disability or gender. They were born that way, it was God's decision, deal with it. Moral number 2. Heroism is great, but callousness brings disaster. Don't do it. Moral number 3. Help each other. Kinship is the only thing keeping our species alive. Moral number 4. There's always a bigger fish. Doesn't matter how badass you are, eventually you're gonna find someone who can beat you into the ground. I'm pretty sure this is the only hero story I know about where the hero actually learns a modicum of humility in the end. It's not time to
You'd think a
make
story about a
change.
7-headed dragon,
Just
daddy issues, and a journey through hell would at least have been made for TV movie by now. You would think, but how long did it take for a really successful epic fantasy to be set in Africa? Written by Evan Winter. By the way, highly recommend Rage of Dragons and Fires of Vengeance. Excellent books. Fun fact, trying to find visual references for this was a nightmare. A colorful Pinteresty nightmare. Though I can understand that. I had the same problem with the Pele video. Searching for stuff like traditional breeding clothing turned up a million white ladies and their costume inspiration boards. Yeah. White people do that a lot. With no sources, obviously, because Pinterest is awful. Yeah. Surprisingly, the Seattle Children's Theater production of Mwindo was one of the most useful unofficial sources for character designs. Good job, Seattle Children's Theater. Mostly because it was the only one I could find. Understandable. My favorite part of this story is the bit where Mwindo default problem-solving method was straight up murdering the person and resurrecting them again later. Hey, at least he resurrected them and just didn't leave them dead. That's nice, I mean, I guess. But it's still, like, pretty traumatizing to die and then be brought back to life because, you know, you still experience the whole death thing and then you're brought back to life and you're like, ah! I thought I died. Very traumatizing. I mean, if you can pull it off, why not, right? Fair. Honestly, I get that. And that was Miscellaneous Myths, the Epic of Mwindo, an African, South African? Southern Africa? Yeah, well, Congo, Central Africa. Depends on what you want to call Central and Southern Africa. The Congo, I think, is typically seen as Central. I think, part of Central. I don't know. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.